In 1964, one company in America printed 3 times more stamps than the United States Post Office. They weren't postage stamps. They were tiny green squares of gummed paper, handed out at supermarket checkout counters and gas pumps from coast to coast. At their peak, these stamps were collected by, according to some estimates, more American households than voted in presidential elections, and they built an empire worth billions. Then they vanished so completely that an entire generation has never heard of them. In this video, we'll step inside the economy that ran on licking and sticking. We'll see how a single sheet of printed paper turned ordinary grocery shopping into a treasure hunt, and turned a 19th century startup into one of the most powerful consumer companies in post-war America. We'll learn the hidden financial trick that made the whole system wildly profitable, even though the stamps were given away for free. We'll walk through the redemption centers where families traded books of stamps for toasters, patio furniture, and silverware sets. And we'll understand why a machine that once touched 80% of American households broke apart in barely a decade. In the years after World War II, American retail underwent one of the fastest transformations in commercial history. The small corner grocery, the kind where a clerk stood behind a wooden counter and fetched items from shelves by hand, was being swallowed by a new creature, the supermarket. By the early 1950s, self-service supermarkets were opening at a pace of several per week across the country. They were enormous by pre-war standards, 10,000, 15,000, sometimes 20,000 square feet of floor space, stacked with gleaming metal shelving and fluorescent lighting. And they all sold exactly the same things. That was the problem. A can of Del Monte peaches at one supermarket was identical to a can of Del Monte peaches at the store 3 blocks away. National brands had homogenized the American pantry, and price competition between supermarkets was brutal and thin-margined. A store might undercut a rival by a penny on a gallon of milk, but shoppers barely noticed. Store owners were desperate for something, anything, that would make a customer choose their aisles over the competitors. Advertising helped, but everyone advertised. Free parking helped, but every new strip mall supermarket already had a lot. The question was not how to sell more products. The products sold themselves. The question was how to make the act of shopping itself feel like it came with a bonus, a reward that kept a family coming back week after week. And that question had already been answered decades earlier by 2 men in Jackson, Michigan. Thomas Sperry and Shelley Byron Hutchinson founded the Sperry and Hutchinson Company in 1896. Their concept was elegant and, for the era, radical. They would manufacture small adhesive stamps and sell them in bulk to retail merchants, department stores, grocers, dry goods shops, at a cost of a few dollars per thousand. The merchants would hand those stamps to customers with every purchase, typically 1 stamp for every 10 cents spent. Customers would paste the stamps into collection books provided free by S&H. When a book was full, 1,200 stamps across 24 pages, the customer could bring it to an S&H redemption center and trade it for merchandise selected from a printed catalog. The idea wasn't entirely original. Trading stamps had existed in scattered forms since the 1880s. But Sperry and Hutchinson did what their competitors didn't. They built national infrastructure. They standardized the stamp design, printed uniform catalogs, and opened their own redemption storefronts in cities and towns across the country. They didn't sell products to stores. They sold a system. And with that system, a reason for customers to return. For the first half of the 20th century, the business grew steadily but modestly. Department stores offered the stamps. Some drugstores did. A scattering of gas stations. The green stamp was a pleasant extra, not a national obsession. Then came the post-war supermarket boom, and everything accelerated. As new self-service stores multiplied and fought for loyalty in a market where every competitor carried the same national brands at nearly the same prices, S&H green stamps became the tiebreaker. Between the late 40s and the mid-50s, the number of retailers offering S&H stamps more than tripled. By the end of the decade, the green stamp was no longer a novelty. It was a fixture of American commerce, as expected at the checkout counter as the paper bag and the receipt. And the machine behind it was far more sophisticated than anyone outside the company understood. Here's how the money moved. A supermarket purchased S&H stamps from the company at roughly 2 to 3% of its total sales volume. That was the cost of participation. In return, the store earned the right to display the famous sign, "We give S&H green stamps," a phrase that, by the late 1950s, carried the pulling power of a nationally recognized brand. The arithmetic seemed, on its face, suicidal. A typical supermarket operated on margins of about 2 cents of profit for every dollar of sales. Spending another 2 or 3 cents per dollar on stamps should have wiped out those margins entirely. But the stamps drove traffic. A housewife choosing between 2 grocery stores of roughly equal convenience and price would choose the one that gave stamps consistently, predictably, almost automatically. Industry surveys from the period suggested that stamp-giving stores saw sales increases of anywhere from 10 to 25%. The stamps didn't eat the margin. They expanded the revenue base beneath it. And there was a psychological lock. Once a shopper had begun filling a stamp book, she was committed. Switching to a store that didn't offer stamps meant abandoning a half-filled book, the equivalent of throwing away money she'd already earned. Economists today call this a switching cost. In 1957, store owners just called it common sense. The stamps arrived home in sheets or strips, long perforated rows of small green squares, each roughly the size of a postage stamp, printed with the S&H Shield logo. Pasting them into saver books was a household ritual. Millions of American families, overwhelmingly women and children, sat at kitchen tables on weekday evenings, licking stamps and pressing them into the saver books one by one. Each page held 50 stamps. Each book held 24 pages. A completed book, 1,200 stamps, representing roughly $120 worth of grocery purchases. The licking was real, and it was work. S&H stamps used a water-activated adhesive, the same gum technology used on postage stamps of the period. Some families kept a damp sponge beside the book. Others used their tongues. Children were recruited as helpers, partly because small fingers were nimble, and partly because the repetitive task had the satisfying quality of a game with a tangible payoff. And there was always a payoff. The S&H catalog, officially called the Idea Book, was the emotional engine of the entire operation. Published annually and distributed for free at redemption centers and participating stores, the Idea Book was, by some accounts, one of the most widely circulated publications in the country, with distribution figures that rivaled major mail order catalogs. It listed hundreds of items arranged by category: table lamps, mixing bowls, outdoor grills, luggage sets, wall clocks, transistor radios, stainless steel flatware, and, for the truly patient collector, complete sets of living room furniture. Each item had a price listed not in dollars, but in books. A toaster, 2.5 books. A set of bath towels, 1.5. A portable television, 20 or more, representing a year or longer of disciplined grocery shopping. The Redemption Center was where the system became physical. S&H operated hundreds of these storefronts across the country. By the mid-1960s, the network was one of the largest specialty retail chains in America. They resembled something between a small department store and a government office. Glass display cases held rows of gleaming merchandise, small kitchen appliances, tableware, toys, bed linens, decorative items. Behind the counter, staff in company uniforms counted books, verified page counts, and processed exchanges with the practiced efficiency of bank tellers. Walking into a redemption center with a stack of filled books was, for many families, the closest thing to shopping for free. No cash changed hands. A woman placed her books on the counter, pointed to an item in the catalog, and walked out with a boxed toaster under her arm. The psychological framing was immensely powerful. This was not a purchase. This was a reward. A shopper who might hesitate to spend $20 on a serving tray at a department store would trade 5 stamp books for the identical item without a second thought, even though those books represented roughly the same amount of money, filtered through months of grocery spending. The indirectness was the magic, but the deepest profit in the stamp business was not in selling stamps to retailers. It was in what happened to the stamps afterward. S&H collected its revenue the moment a supermarket or gas station purchased a supply of stamps. The cost of honoring those stamps, the merchandise sitting in the redemption center, was only incurred when a customer actually completed a book and walked through the door. The gap between those two events could be weeks, months, or years. In finance, this is called float money, collected now against obligations fulfilled later. During that gap, S&H held the cash. It earned interest. It invested. And then there was breakage, the industry term for stamps that were issued but never redeemed. Not every strip of green squares made it into a book. Books were started and abandoned. Families moved to towns without a nearby redemption center. Enthusiasm waned. Pages slipped behind radiators and under couch cushions. Industry estimates from the period suggested that somewhere between 15 and 30% of all stamps issued were never brought in. For S&H, that was pure margin. Revenue collected with no corresponding cost of goods. Combined float and breakage made the trading stamp business extraordinarily lucrative. S&H wasn't really in the stamp business, and it wasn't really in the merchandise business. It was in the deferred obligation business, collecting money today for promises it might never have to keep. It was, in structure, closer to an insurance company than a retailer. And decades later, the credit card rewards industry would adopt this exact model, almost line for line. The system began cracking in the late 1960s, and the fractures came from multiple directions at once. The first pressure was internal. S&H's enormous success had spawned dozens of imitators. Gold Bond, Top Value, Plaid Stamps, Blue Chip Stamps, and scores of smaller regional programs. By the mid-60s, the trading stamp market was saturated. When every supermarket and every gas station offered some variety of stamp, the competitive advantage that had justified the cost evaporated. Stamps no longer drew customers from one store to another. They were simply another expense baked into the price of groceries, universal, unremarkable, and increasingly resented by the retailers who paid for them. Then came the discounters. A new breed of supermarket operator appeared in the late 60s and early 70s, chains that stripped away every frill, including stamps, and passed the savings directly to customers through lower shelf prices. The pitch was devastating in its simplicity. Why pay 2 or 3% more on every grocery trip to receive stamps worth roughly the same amount in merchandise when the store across the highway just charged less? The early no-frills grocers proved that given a clear choice, shoppers would take the discount over the stamp. Every time. Inflation sharpened the blade. As consumer prices climbed steeply through the 1970s, food costs alone rose dramatically across the decade. Families grew ruthlessly focused on the bottom line. The slow gratification of filling stamp books over weeks and months to earn a table lamp felt increasingly absurd when the grocery bill itself was swelling with each trip. The patience that the stamp system demanded was a luxury that inflation could no longer support. Regulators added pressure of their own. Several states enacted laws requiring that stamps be redeemable for cash, fractions of a cent per stamp. This was a lethal blow to the psychology of the system. Once a stamp had a transparent, tiny dollar value, it was no longer a magical free reward. It was a rounding error. Gas stations, once the second largest category of stamp distributors after supermarkets, began abandoning the system during the oil crisis of 1973. With fuel prices spiking and supply uncertain, station owners slashed every discretionary cost they could identify. Stamps were among the first casualties. By the mid-70s, the collapse was irreversible. S&H's stamp revenue fell year over year. Redemption centers closed. The idea book grew thinner. Competitors folded or merged out of existence. The company that had once printed more stamps than the post office found itself managing a shrinking operation quarter by quarter with no path back. The trading stamp did not die in a single dramatic event. It faded steadily, quietly, and then all at once. The green stamp disappeared from checkout counters, but the idea behind it never did. It changed form. When American Airlines launched the A-Advantage frequent flyer program in 1981, the underlying architecture was almost identical to S&H green stamps. Earn credits through routine transactions, accumulate them over time, redeem them for rewards from a catalog of options. The psychology was the same. The switching cost that discouraged defection, the slow-building anticipation, the sensation of getting something for nothing that was, in reality, financed by a markup buried somewhere in the transaction. The concept had simply moved from the grocery aisle to the jet bridge. Credit card rewards programs, which exploded through the 1990s and now represent a multi-billion-dollar global industry, run on precisely the same engine. Every airline mile, every cashback percentage point, every hotel loyalty tier is a direct descendant of the small green square. A checkout clerk once handed across the counter alongside a receipt. The mechanics are digital now, and the accumulation is automatic, no licking required. But the core trick is unchanged to reward a customer for spending. She was going to do anyway, and make the reward feel like a gift, rather than a cost she already paid. Even the breakage model survived intact. Credit card companies know that a meaningful share of earned reward points are never redeemed. Retail gift cards carry billions of dollars in unused balances every year in the United States alone. The float and the breakage, the twin profit engines that made S&H so lucrative in 1962, are alive and generating revenue in virtually every modern loyalty program. Even the language endures. The phrase "redeem your points" is a direct inheritance from the stamp era. So is the idea of a rewards catalog and the behavioral loop of earn, save, choose. Every time a credit card app displays a points balance, it is displaying a digital ghost of the green stamp book. Streamlined, stripped of the adhesive, but structurally unchanged. There are attics and basements across America that still hold them. Half-filled S&H saver books, the stamps brown at the edges, the pages stiff with decades-old adhesive. Each one is an artifact of a transaction that was never completed, a reward that was never claimed. What the green stamp system created was not merely a loyalty program. It was a shared domestic ritual. Millions of families sat at the same kind of kitchen table, on the same kind of weekday evening, licking the same small squares of gummed paper, pressing them into the same pages, turning to the same catalog to choose the same categories of prizes. The toaster that arrived home from the redemption center wasn't purchased. It was earned collectively, incrementally, one grocery trip at a time. There was a patience built into the process, and a particular satisfaction in that patience that no instant cashback notification on a smartphone can replicate. But the system was also, at its core, an illusion. The stamps were never free. Their cost was woven into every price on every shelf of every store that gave them out. The reward was real. The toaster worked, the flatware gleamed, but so was the markup that financed it. Consumers paid for their own prizes without ever seeing the transaction clearly. When the discount grocers made that math visible, the spell broke. What replaced it is faster, frictionless, and incomparably more efficient. Points accumulate silently in databases. Rewards arrive without effort or adhesive. No one sits at a kitchen table anymore, pressing tiny green squares onto a page with a damp sponge, counting rows, doing the quiet arithmetic of patience. Something was gained in that efficiency. Whether something was also lost is a question every loyalty program in America is still trying to answer. The S&H green stamp was just one piece of how post-war America engineered everyday life into a series of ingenious, interlocking systems, each one designed to keep money and people moving in a specific direction. If the mechanics behind this one surprised you, there's another story worth knowing: how the American shopping mall went from a radical architectural experiment to the undisputed center of suburban life, and then slowly collapsed under the weight of its own success. That full story is waiting right here. The channel is How America Worked, and there is much more to uncover.